welcome to the show. Long overdue. Give it up for the one and only Ricky Glore, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for him, everyone. Hot breath.
Thank you so much, Michael Cera.
Yeah,
I am happy to be
he's starting with a roast. And I've got to,
No, I do not roast. I would never put myself in a roast. I am not a roast comic. People who can do it, great. Like, I can't. That's the only one I have for tonight.
Oh, I see. See, shots fired, and then you're like, but not me, not little innocent old me.
And then just a flag waved immediately.
Right. Okay. I'll let that slide because you're a special guest here. But I've been known to be cut out of a Comedy Central taping of Roast Battle, so don't get it twisted. Don't let the hair fool you. I've got jokes that didn't make the cut for Comedy Central, so not to brag. It's all good. So let us get into this Q&A with Yogi Bear here, and we will see. Yogi Bear, did nobody get that?
For me?
Burn?
Hey, boo-boo.
Okay.
You got a big in a basket?
I was trying to roast you, but then nobody laughed.
If I'm Yogi, you are definitely boo-boo. Talking about Hanna-Barbera cartoons that aren't relevant. Remember that? Didn't they do a Dan Aykroyd and like Justin Timberlake semi-live action Yogi Bear movie?
Did they?
Like in 2007? Am I crazy? Like it came and went like real quick. Like on the heels of like Scooby-Doo live action.
I don't know. I mean, yes, you are crazy, but I don't know if that's part of it. What I'm doing, I'm actually adjusting. I remember in our last Q&A here on Zoom that I had to adjust, like, there's a green bar that, will show up in the middle of Zoom. Yeah. People were like, you got to hide that green bar. So this is me.
All right, here we go.
Live on air.
I'll fill in some space with some useless movie knowledge of movies I've never seen. Yogi Bear semi-live action movie did come out in 2010. Very much in the vein of like the Scooby-Doo movies with Matthew Lillard, starring Dan Aykroyd as Yogi Bear and Justin Timberlake as Boo Boo and Tom Cavanaugh as Ranger Smith.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that useful knowledge,
everyone left the chat.
Yeah, everyone's done now. Let's get into you, Ricky. And I love. I mean, first off, I'm a fan. And I'm always like keeping an eye out for comics that are just willing to just do things. Like it's very easy in comedy to like get lost in process or what if but that's hard or I don't know how. But I really enjoy seeing comedians like you who are like just willing to just do things, and create and really just try. And it's working out with all the success you've had. And it's only just the beginning with this new album. But I would really be curious just to, yes. And go support his album as well. That'll be linked in the show notes. I just bought it. Everyone should buy it. If you're a fan of comedy, go support. I actually got one of the limited edition signed ones. So.
Oh.
Got one of the signed ones. Not to brag or anything, but.
Get some liner notes. Get some extra pictures of me with my baby.
Yeah. Daddy got a stimulus check from the government. He just blew it on Ricky Glore's signed album. No, but honestly, if you're a fan of comedy, definitely go support what Ricky's doing here because it's an inspiration for all of us comics to really just, you don't have to wait on anyone. Get out there and do it. So just to start off with, can you give us a little context? Yeah, about like, how long you've been doing comedy? I mean, how this album came to be, kind of like your journey.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a Cliff Notes version because I said before we started, I could ramble. I could start from the time that my mom and dad met at a bar and started flirting with one another before I was a gleam in their eye, but I won't. I started doing stand-up in 2005 at Newport on the Levee Funny Bone, one of the Funny Bone franchises, which is owned by the Improv and Levity Live, that group. And it was one of those shopping mall kind of comedy clubs.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's a Forever 21, there's a Hot Topic in there. And it was in Northern Kentucky right on the river. I was going to college and I desperately wanted to be on the college improv team. And I auditioned and I didn't make it because my trajectory in my head was get a theater degree, then go to Chicago, do improv in college,
Mm-hmm.
go to Chicago, do improv Olympics, do Second City, and then I'll be on SNL. Like I'll work for SNL in some way. I'll change their waste paper baskets. I'll do something for SNL.
Uh-huh.
So when that didn't happen, I went in a little bit into panic mode because I was like, okay, I have this creativity that I want to get out. But how can I do that? I want to entertain. So a friend of mine said, well, they're offering stand-up classes at Funny Bone. And as much as I enjoyed stand-up, some of my favorites being Seinfeld, Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy, Steve Martin, I wasn't sure what the technique was to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was a writer and I had done theater, I had never written something for myself at that moment. So I went to the class, and the comedian teaching it was Jeff Jenna, who, if you're not familiar with him, he's been in the business forever in every facet, kind of like you're talking about, like television, movies, touring. He has a dry bar special out as well. So check that out.
Yeah.
On the dry bar. So when I took the class, the first class, Jeff started talking to us and he said, okay, there's like 30 of you here. If any of you came here thinking that I will make you funnier than what you are, then you need to not come to the next class, which the next class they started charging.
I love that.
And he said, because the only thing I can do, he said, I can give you an outline of writing prompts and make you get on your feet and talk in front of the class for 3 minutes every class. You're guaranteed to talk in front of the class based off a writing prompt you had the week before.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but that's all I can do. He said, and then I can give you guidance for your voice. But he's like, I'm going to tell you now, finding the voice is the hardest thing to do. So he's like, I can give you experience, and that means you don't have to necessarily go to open mic bars. You still need to do that, but you'll also have this. And at the end of the class, it culminates in a showcase at the comedy club on a Wednesday night. And the room's packed because it's filled with people that you've been telling you're taking this class.
Exactly.
So it's everyone. It's the best possible audience. People who are attentive and just want to see everyone succeed. So I took that class, and then I loved going and seeing stand-up there. They used to offer I think it's first show Friday, first show Saturday. You could be 18 and up and go see a show.
Mm-hmm.
But then they changed it to 21 and up for all shows. And Kentucky has a weird liquor law, that you can be 19 and a day and be a server and work a place that is just 21 and up. So I put in an application to work there and got hired so I could see all the shows because I wasn't 21 yet.
Smart.
And then, I did open mics. I did every Wednesday show that they had there at the club, which are usually sparsely attended. You sign up, a couple weeks in advance, you get your 5 minutes, but at least you're at a club and, there's a light and it's the stage. And because I work there, I got to hound the GM, and I said, I do stand up. And he's like, oh God, the last thing we need is another work here who wants to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, but I think I'm getting all right. On one of the Wednesdays that you have the open mics here, can you watch my set and see if I'm good enough to MC? So he did. And he's like, yeah, you're good enough to MC, like no skin off my ass, And so from that moment forward, the first weekend I did was in 2005 for Finesse Mitchell. And then pretty much anytime any SNL cast member or anyone who would touch the show came through, I would like put dibs on the dry erase board to see if I could MC for them. And I could name drop everybody that I got to MC for, but it was such a cool learning experience in seeing how comics use their energy on stage, especially as headliner sets.
Mm-hmm.
They don't waste, like someone like Jim Brewer, which was, I had already been emceeing for a couple years. Quick story. It was the Thursday night, and neither Jim or the feature act were there. And the sound guy came down, Mike, and he was like, Jim and the feature act aren't here. You got to go on stage, which at that time I could only do like 12 minutes. And he's like, I'm going to, if you're done with your set and they're not here, I'm going to blinky light you to keep going, do crowd work. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, but if I hard light you, if I just leave it on, they're here. Introduce, just say, and ladies and gentlemen, your feature comic tonight, because they didn't know who was coming. So then the music starts like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Funny Bone Comedy Club. Are you here to have a good time? Yes. And it's a Thursday. And so that's playing. And I'm already in my head like, okay, how much more than 12 minutes do I have? Do I have jokes that I've thrown away that I could put in the middle because they're not as strong, so I want to sandwich them?
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm doing this, as I'm like sitting there like Rain Man trying to do some like quantum physics of jokes, Jim Brewer comes running up to me and he's like, hey man, I'm Jim. We only have a feature act this weekend. So you do 30 minutes and then just bring me up. Okay, have a great show. Oh. And then leaves. And I'm like, I don't have 30 minutes.
Right.
And I've never just brought up, usually you do the announcements, the specials of food. You say Eddie Griffin's going to be here next weekend, so get your tickets now. Mm-hmm. Do you guys like Bruce because he's coming at the end of the month?
How long into your career was this, by the way?
I think this was 2 years in.
2 years in, doing 30 minutes unexpectedly in front of Jim Brewer.
A sold out weekend. Like the weekend's already sold out before I start.
Oh my gosh.
So there's that. Also with that is, do you know the Jerry Seinfeld documentary Comedian?
Of course. Yeah.
The Orny Adams, right? That movie paints a very specific picture of Orny. The movie Comedian, with the commentary with Colin Quinn and Seinfeld, and the movie itself are kind of my comedy Bible. Every about 6 months I watch it, either the commentary or just the movie. Mm-hmm. I still do, just to brush up on some bits of wisdom that Orny puts out there and Seinfeld and other comics put out there. Orny was coming through the Funny Bone, and this is like 2009. So I've been doing comedy for 4 years. I'm featuring now some when the headliners aren't bringing in their features, but Orny's coming through and I'm not working that weekend. I'm not performing and I'm not serving. So I went and saw the show on a Thursday night, and I was talking to him afterwards, and he said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a server here, but I also do stand-up. And I was already predispositioned from hearing some other stories about Orny and seeing the documentary to think that he might be a little bit of a diva, or a little bit difficult. And I'm talking to him, and he's talking to me like a peer, even though he has no idea who I am.
Great.
And I'm not giving him any credentials. And he says, oh, great, you're a comic too? He's like, you want to come and do guest sets this weekend? And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah. He's like, just come every show. And he's like, and you can do a $10 guest set, and I'll make sure that whatever you want to eat or drink, that the green room takes care of.
Wow.
And then, so I invited my parents to come see the Sunday night show, because the sweetest thing about a guest set is you go on after the MC, so you kind of have that cushion, like you would a feature act. There's no expectations because they introduce you as being a very special guest is on the show tonight. So the audience is like, oh, I don't know who it is, but maybe he's someone special. And Orny did one of the best 50 minutes of comedy that I've ever seen, of like energy, material, was so good. And his generosity just blew me away, because Friday night I could have gone up for a show and been like, Orny Adams sucks, and dropped the mic and walked away. But he heard I was a comic, felt good about giving someone a slot on the show. Maybe he was working new material, so he didn't have his full headliner. I don't know what the reason was. He was just super nice.
But how did the 30-minute set go with Jim Brewer?
It was good. It taught me how to talk slower.
Nice.
I got through it. I definitely, I kind of talked to Brewer that weekend about like, oh, I've never done that much. He's like, oh, you're doing good. And he's like, I think you should do more on this. I think you should do more on that.
Wow.
Comedians, most of the time, what I learned was, and this might not always be true, if you heard of them, most of the time they're pretty decent people. if they're up and coming and you haven't heard of them, they're good people. If you've kind of heard of them, like they were on that sitcom once in like 96, so a lot of times they were dicks, but that's not like name dropping anybody. But like, so that taught me a lot. And after I was house emceeing and featuring for a while, I then graduated college and went to Chicago, where I kind of did stand up for a little bit, but I put it on the back burner. I was doing a lot of improv, doing Second City Improv Olympics. My first week there, I was serving at Second City, and I got to see Lauren Michaels, Seth Meyers, Michael Shoemaker, and Higgins come and watch people performing in shows to cast them for SNL. Wow. 3 days in a row, my first week up there. So that was stupid surreal. But then I performed, I wrote musicals, I did a lot of storefront theater, and I did a lot of improv, which I kind of stopped doing when I realized that people didn't put the time and thought to it in as much, or the commitment. So I got more into theater again. And then when I moved back to Kentucky in 2017, I was like, okay, I want to do stand-up again. And I want to start working on a headliner set and start pushing myself to get 45 minutes. And so from 2017 to this past February was just laser focusing on that.
And this can really tie into our first question as well. And thinking of, I asked you like kind of how you got started and everything. And this actually helps in terms of word economy of answering questions.
It's funny because one of the tips I have for young stand-ups is to write it out and then go through with a pen or delete words that you can delete, and the joke still makes sense. Even though I don't do that with my answers.
But yeah, I just thought that would be a perfect segue into the first question. But you did preface this with that you like, and it was all relevant information. I just thought it was a good opportunity to throw a little jab. Yeah. You came out swinging with Michael Cera. I'm on my toes now.
I cannot be the first and only person who's ever said that.
Oh no, I've taken photos as Michael Cera before. Like I just played along.
Yeah.
But I do have more questions as well, but we'll get to people's questions as they come in. But this one comes from Mike Jackson, and he asks, I write daily, but I think my setups are still too long. Any advice for a shorter yet clear setup?
Yeah, avoid asking questions. I'm not sure if Mike does this. I think the quickest way to kill a joke is to ask a question or to ask the audience, because they're all you're never gonna, an answer from the audience is never gonna dictate where you're going unless you're riffing. So don't ask a question like, who here has done this? It doesn't matter. The thing you're going to be talking about, you're probably talking about because it's so relatable that everyone has done it. Or if they haven't, you're going to present it in a way that's going to sound like the juxtaposition of something that is supernatural. And like, well, everyone does this, right? No one does this, you know? So I think eliminating anything that you question, the thing I said before, and this is the Seinfeld thing, is write it, depending on if you physically write or if you type. I usually type and then I handwrite to memorize. And then I go back for a third step, is to then type it again with what I remember, and then check back and see how close it was. Because I really like, for cadence and for flow, I like to know what it is. I think there's a lot of different kinds of stand-ups. Some stand-ups are incredibly naturalistic. I feel like I'm more of a vaudeville stand-up. I'm a song and dance man. Like, I like to do everything.
Yeah.
I grew up on Hope and Crosby. Like, I grew up on Marx Brothers and stuff, and loved watching the Monkees growing up. And so I like kind of giving a whole show. To answer more of the writing, go through and literally eliminate any word that you can and keep on reading it until you've eliminated all the words you can without it sounding like broken speech. I would say setups and segues are not as important as people make it seem to be. that if you feel that it's a weird segue, as long as the timbre of your voice and the tone of your voice has made it clear that you're moving on, then do that. And don't worry also in the performing aspect of the material that you feel like is a little too long, is if something doesn't get a laugh or response that you think it needs, you're hopefully recording the audio of yourself, because I don't think videos is as important. You don't need a tight 5 video to send to NBC when you're first starting off. I like the branded mug. I just saw it because you heard.
Snap. We out
That's
here.
sweet. Do you sell it?
Got a little,
Do you sell those somewhere?
Yeah, on my website, joelbyerscomedy.com.
Buy that. That's a hot mug. I think audio, because audio is so important. I think when you're starting off and you're doing a lot of 5 to 10 minute sets, you're not listening for laughs a lot. I think what you should be listening for is, do you understand what you're saying by hearing the audio? Because sometimes if an audience doesn't laugh, oh God, it could be 100 different permutations and reasons. It could be, it's not funny. That's the worst case. You should still try it and try it in different parts of your set. Could be you're saying it too fast and the people aren't understanding the words. You're not articulating it enough or enunciating. And so record the audio. And then when you're listening back to it, if you're like, okay, I can hear what I'm saying and it's still not getting the laughs, what can I do now to go back and get to the joke quicker? The second city rule of writing sketch comedy is that you start at the most interesting point. So if it's a husband and wife scene where the wife is going to give birth to the baby in the scene, start with her giving birth. Like, don't start with them leading up being like, oh, I think I'm going to have the baby today. It's like, no, get to the most interest. What is the crux of your scene? So I think if you start there in a joke with the littlest lead up, you don't have to make sure that the audience is on the same page. You don't have to make sure that the audience has seen every season of Game of Thrones. Just like whatever you're talking about, just get to it. Like, they'll be on board.
Yeah, and another one that I find helpful is also understanding what you're even trying to say with the joke. So, like, what is the premise of the joke? What are you even trying to say can really help to start to edit out those unnecessary words like Ricky was talking about. But that's something that comes up in the Write 10 Club. That it's like a daily writing challenge we do in this Facebook group where we get a random word and then write for 10 minutes and see who can, write funny jokes and we give feedback. But the big thing is a lot of the times if the joke is too wordy, it's because the comic doesn't even know exactly what the premise of the joke is. So it's good to reverse back to what am I even trying to say, and that'll help majorly.
Reverse engineer. Yeah. Where's your punch and how long did it take for you to get there? Yep. How strong is the punch and how dramatic and performative is your lead in to get to that punch? Mm-hmm. Is it entertaining? Is it filled with jokes as well? Another great way now that we have Twitter is even it doesn't matter about like, oh, well, why should I write? Like, no one's following me, no one's retweeting, no one's liking. Doesn't matter. Send it out into the ether and it's there. Granted, be sure that you're not just diarrheaing. And if you do touch any bit of success 5 years from now, that you don't have this random racist tweet or homophobic tweet, but use that because they're putting permutations on you of how many words you can say. So if you're trying to write to entertain in that avenue, then you're really writing, probably distilling the joke to the longest that it needs to be in a performance. And then what's great about it is if you follow a lot of comedians or you have comic friends, they might inspire you with the tags they put on it. Because comics love nothing more than replying with the joke that they're like, I think this one's funnier. Which may then go to you, be like, oh, that doesn't fit my voice or where I'm going, but that does make me think that it could be this. Or if it's a really good tag that you like, that you're like, man, that really does help this joke, message them. Or if you know them, talk to them. Say, would you mind if I use this joke? And 90% of the time, they'll be fine with it. The 10% of the time is if you don't ask them and then they hear it or see about it later of you perpetuating that it's something you came up with, that's just bad. That's bad business.
Yeah, I would be interested to even jump into the business side a little bit and touching on you saying if you blow up and then in 5 years, like they see this racist tweet, like something I admire about you is like your branding, like your dry bar special is dad bod, your album is spitting image, and there's an image of you with a microphone holding your baby. There's like you have a great website that's very well polished. Like you seem to not only focus on the craft, but also in show business, the show, but also the business side of this game. So do you have any insight, or it's just I've noticed that for myself as well. Like I try to be mindful of it because I feel like so many comics overlook that. So I really notice it when a comic, like my comedy special is called The Trophy Husband. Like I'm really working on branding and it. So like it seems like that's something you're focused on as well. Where did that come from, and like what kind of tips do you have for how you were able to develop such a cohesive brand identity?
I think a little bit of it, since I mentioned before about being such a fan and a student of the Monkees, they are a prefabricated group that were extremely four talented people who were then packaged by two producers and creators that were trying to buck the system at the time. Um, Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider. I'm going to mention things that aren't going to matter to anybody, but if you were to look into it, they weren't cigar chomping guys, they were hippie guys. Bert Schneider was the son of Abe Schneider, who ran Columbia Studios back in the 60s. So he was kind of a hippie guy. Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider spun the money they made for the Monkees and made Five Easy Pieces and Easy Rider. They started turning Hollywood on its head of being these indie produced movies that were actually speaking to the counterculture. But what they did with the Monkees is they recognized what was unique about each one. They didn't say, let's do the Beatles on TV and this guy's Ringo, this guy's Paul, this guy's John. They went, no, Mike Nesmith. He's got a Southern drawl. He's kind of a Jimmy Stewart quality. Let's not make him be something he's not. Let's use this guy. Davy Jones. Oh, he's cute. He's small. He's unassuming. He is going to be our teen heartthrob. Mickey Dolenz, little goofy looking, kind of funny, good voice. Like they knew what they had and they didn't fight against it. This goes in, I think the business of being your own promoter as a comedian is one of the hardest things that comics strive for, which is the comic's voice. And I don't know what, I don't have my voice down pat. I've read, I mean, I know you're not supposed to. I've read the comments on the dry bar clips that they put on YouTube where, 60,000 people have watched it and commented or whatever. And like, you're not supposed to read the comments, but like a couple people are like, this guy's delivery sounds like he's asking a question every time he's talking, even though I said don't ask questions. So like I read that though, and I want to take into account, I'm like, does my voice have that roller coaster kind of like da 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 da? Like, like maybe it does. And maybe that's something I need to work on. But the thing I have found in my voice is not trying to be something that I'm not, especially in stand-up. I'm growing in the sense of there are some topics that on my next hour I am going to talk about, or I'm going to try, and maybe it's not going to work. And I don't consider it pandering, but there's a segment on guns that I want to try to work out. But I also know as a comic, I'm not going to put it at the beginning of my set, and I'm not going to put it at the end of my set. I'm going to put it right in the middle. So hopefully you already like me for my first 15 minutes. So then this next 5 minutes where I talk about guns isn't incredibly polarizing, but could clench a couple buttholes in the audience, depending where I'm playing. And then when I'm done with it, hopefully, you aren't so offended by what I said, because I don't think it is offensive, that you're still with me. Maybe you even thought it was funny and you didn't think it was as political as it was, but then I'm going to finish out and you're not even going to remember that bit if you didn't like it. But for the business side of things, talking about starting off at the Funny Bone, doing open mics and emceeing, I've gone through my old black and white notebooks, those composite notebooks, and I didn't talk about anything personal. probably until I actually started back up again in 2017. I had the Burt Reynolds story that you can hear on the album that they cut from Dry Bar, which is interesting, which I think it's because it's about stealing. And the Mormons didn't want to talk about stealing,
Right.
which is super interesting. Um, but like I had that story that happened to me. I went to Campbell County High School in Kentucky where our mascot was a camel and our colors were purple and gold. That had all happened to me. When I was first starting off in stand up, I recognized that that was funny and that was funny to me, but nowhere in my mind could I access and think that that was worthy material to present to an audience. So I look back at my old notebooks and I'm weirdly dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Not vulgar, but like cursing a lot and stuff. And I don't typically curse a bunch when I talk. There's no reason for it. I'm not incredibly religious. I'm agnostic. I believe there's something. I don't know what it is. So it astonishes me anybody that's like, this is my religion and anything else is wrong. But as long as your religion doesn't hurt somebody else, it tells you to go cause someone else pain. Doesn't bug me.
But when did you try to start packaging it into like an actual business? I mean, dad bod and spitting it. Like, you're clearly being. I like you're saying. Well, when I started getting more personal on stage, I started to figure out what was unique to me. That's when you seem to really start getting traction. So is that from the branding side of like, what is unique about me, and then how can I almost just create not a character, but almost like an identity,
like an exaggerated version of myself. Yeah. It also came with embracing with what I like doing on stage and not feeling shameful from other comedians.
Oh, boom.
Right? Like, no, how many times has the comedian gone up with a guitar and an open mic or whatever, and every comic in the audience who has already gone up or is about to go up is like, oh, here's this hacky comedian with a guitar.
Guilty.
Right? Guilty. I've done it too. I 100% have done it. And yes, a lot of times they will prove you right, but there are your Stephen Lynch's who you don't hear about much anymore. There are your Adam Sandlers who can destroy and be incredibly, prolific with their comedy with an instrument. There can be your Dimitri Martins or your Zach Galifianakises who incorporate their instrument in such a way that you think of that instrument being their appendage. Like there's a comic who got compared to Dimitri Martin and it burned him up starting off is Mike Birbiglia. He hated everyone in New York when he went to New York. When he moved from Washington, was like, hey, you're really good. You know who you should check out? Mike Birbiglia. And he's like, I know! I've heard that before. But so, do you remember, have you watched Birbiglia's early stuff?
Not much.
He closes his show by playing a guitar. And like, that seemed a little Dimitri Martin-esque of the kind of like the late 90s, early 2000s scene, where I would guess Dimitri Martin is musically inclined, as Birbiglia probably plays guitar, but isn't that super, experienced on it. But I think those guys were also trying to find something that they could do so their name wouldn't be likened to like Mitch Hedberg all the time, who is another comic very much like them, did a lot of one-liners. Now, Birbiglia, flash forward, not to diminish Dimitri Martin, he still performs, but like Birbiglia shifted into being a one-man show where he's telling these long stories. So I feel like he evolved into the comedian, the entertainer that he wanted to be, with the films that he's making too, that are incredibly personal, that I really respect. But then there are stand-ups who are naysayers and are like, oh, well, what Hannah Gadsby does and what Mike Birbiglia does, that's not stand-up. That's one-man show. And it's like, is their goal to entertain and make you laugh? Like, is that the first bullet point? I think so. So why isn't that a variation of stand-up where, like, if you went to a video store, which you can't anymore, and you saw the horror, or if like you looked on Netflix, horror movies, there are subgenres of thriller, suspense, mystery. A lot of times are considered horror. Why aren't those subgenres are just as valid as a movie just labeling itself as horror? So why can't that be the same thing for performance and like stand up? Whether it's a musical stand up, whether it's someone who does impressions. Am I going to do impressions in my next hour? Maybe. Like I have a Jack Black impression that I started working on after this hour happened that I was like, oh, maybe I'll do. I have a Patrick Stewart dramatically reading Ice Ice Baby that didn't make it into this thing. And like, but then I think like, but I also, I do Sean Connery, which people can be like, oh, everyone does Sean Connery. Like I don't do Christopher Walken because it didn't, I like Christopher Walken, but it doesn't connect to me the way that like Sean Connery dramatically reading Safety Dance does, of like my love for James Bond and like the Untouchables. So the branding for me didn't come from, well, I need to brand to really, isolate it down to the singularity of this package that I need to sell. It went with being a writer, and I'm like, well, what's the narrative? Well, the narrative is this. And, like for Dry Bar, I gave them the picture of me. They did a photo session, and that's whatever picture they have of me holding a microphone, looking way thinner than I actually am. I'm like, I think they made me skinnier. But like I gave them the picture of me with Anna, my daughter, in the front pouch, the one that I ended up using for my album. And they asked me, what do I want to call the album? And I said, I think Dad Bod, because that's a joke that happens very early on. I think yes, it is trying to think of like, oh, what's a hashtag or like something that is talked about a lot in an easy sell. Because they took pictures of me playing the ukulele, which they didn't use the song I played in the special. So luckily, I told them, I was like, I don't think you want to get many pictures of me playing the ukulele. I only play one song at that time for the special because it's only they only record 25 minutes, but they ended up not using it anyway. So it's good. But like, I wanted it to be something that wasn't misleading to anyone who might click it too. Like I didn't want a title to be something that might make someone think that like I'm an edgy comic, because then they're going to click play looking for like, someone who's talking about politics. There's like finger on the pulse and is really cool. That's not how I would perpetuate myself. So I was like, Dad Bod. It's a joke that happens like in the first 10 minutes. I talk about it a lot at the top. They're going to click it. They're going to hear that Dad Bod joke. They're going to hear me talking about my daughter. It's not going to be a bait and switch.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and thank you everyone posting with your questions here. I will get to them after this one because this is something I've been curious about. And Glenn Tickle actually just posted a link. He posted a link to Ricky's album that you can go pick up. But
Glenn is a fantastic comic. Please watch his if you have Amazon Prime. Good grief!
I got it.
The special that he did about his brother's passing. You want to talk about a specific show that could be about something that you click and be very sad when you read the description. But I think it's very cathartic. I knew it was cathartic for Glenn, but cathartic for you in any loss you've had, big or small, watching it to find the cathartic nature of humor, even if it's not your own, of relying on humor to help you express your emotions through whatever tragedy, like I said, big or small, that you've had in your life. So yeah, he has a Dry Bar coming out too. I think it should be within the next couple months.
Yeah, a lot of people are getting these Dry Bars. What it sounds like?
How are they getting these?
No, I'm not like jealous. I'm just thinking like, like what's the deal with this Dry Bar? Like, it seems like
What's the deal with these dry
They
bars?
record it, but then it seems like they have full ownership. Do you just get paid a flat fee? Do you get part of the back end? What's the payment structure on this dry bar deal they're throwing away? Not throwing away, but like throwing out there that a lot of people see value in.
Yeah, how their business acumen of how exactly they make money, I couldn't give you a good dissertation on that. For the comedian, you get all expenses paid. You do 2 shows in one night. They are now doing them. They used to do 40 minutes. They're now doing 20 to 25 minutes. The hardest thing is, I know that it's a clean show and they're stringent on the subject of material. Like I said, Jeff Jenna was my stand-up coach. I've opened for him and worked with him. He's been a little bit of a mentor. Because he already did one, I sent him my show, and he very graciously watched it and read my set and gave me notes and pointers of where like he thought things should go, or because I was already working on a headliner set when I got booked for it last July, and then I recorded in September. So I knew it would be 25 minutes of my 45-minute headliner show. So I was like, ooh, okay, I want to do like my best first 10 and my best like cobbled last 15 to make that 25 and not do the middle and not do things that I knew they wouldn't be cool with.
But they fly you out there and then they charge on the app. So do you get a cut of some like every time someone pays?
They do not charge on the app.
Oh,
the app is free.
Okay.
The app is free. So you can watch how many ever specials that they have for free. They charge if you want to download it and own it via, like if you were to rent it.
Yeah.
It's not renting though. It's like you can watch it, whatever. For that, so you don't have to watch it on your phone. You can watch it on your TV or whatever, kind of like Amazon Prime. So they fly you down, all expenses paid. They put you up the night before and the night of, and they pay for the rental car if you have to rent a car. They pay you for both shows a decent wage, a headliner wage. And there are 3 people most of the time on the show. My night, it was Steve Geyer, who's an older comedian who is a gem of a person. He's super nice. And Cam Bertram following me.
From Jacksonville.
Who's like 25, extremely white, and has the voice of Chris Rock. Yeah. Like the sound of him and seeing him couldn't be like diametrically opposed like in any other comedian, but he's a delight. So imagine seeing me, Cam, and Steve, an older comedian, in one night. That's such a different like set of comedians that you would see at any comedy club because they'd never make it that like different of voices. So then, yeah, they pay you for 2 nights, makeup. There's like 10 cameras. It's always a sold out show. It's packed. The audience is amazing. They have an MC who recorded the night before. So if they have a Friday show, I think they bring in someone from the next day. I think that might have been Steve who emceed that night, or a local comic. And then so they slate, they give the credits before they bring you out on stage. They put you in makeup and hair. You get food throughout the day. I mean, it's the most taken care of that you'll be.
Oh, that's great.
Like until you like do a Comedy Central special, I'm sure.
Good. It's good to know. Yeah, I've never heard the behind the scenes, so that's good.
But they also don't tell you what you can or cannot do. So like I'm friends with Jeff Jenna and Erica Rhodes, who had both recorded a special. So they, like I said, luckily looked at my stuff and they gave me some pointers. I have a Kentucky Creationist bit that doesn't really make fun of the Creationist Museum. It just talks about it and brings it up. But they both were like, yeah, I wouldn't do that because it just mentions religion. Like, and that just might be something that doesn't, tickle their fancy. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do that. So I knew not to do that. But I reached out to the producers of Dry Bar, the bookers, and I was like, hey, do you want me to send you a video or the text of what I plan on doing? And they're like, no, we trust you. And so there's a little bit of paranoia of like, okay, I hope I don't do something like I would have never thought that the Burt Reynolds story would have been something that they wouldn't have been cool about.
Never know. So let's start running through these people's questions here. We got people popping in saying this is great. It's yeah, Mike saying thanks for answering my question, real helpful. Michelle, FYI, really enjoying this interview. Thanks, Joel and Ricky. Jason Irvin saying Ricky is very talented, who has a lot of passion for his craft.
Jason Irvin was the makeup man before the pandemic happened. We filmed the opening to a horror movie that I wrote, and he does hair and makeup and special effects. And unfortunately, that has not been able to get edited. It's a horror movie that I was going to use that opening to try to make the whole thing get the budget, but he's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of people are enjoying this. So let's get to their questions here.
like there's ever going to be people like, this is awful. Why is this still going on?
Yeah, this isn't on YouTube yet, but this show will be on YouTube, and I've seen enough of our comments to know, like every other comment is like, this white boy's laugh is so fake. That's like half of the comments about my laugh is everyone thinks it's fake. It's not.
Michael Cera needs to be canceled.
It's only fake when it's for Ricky. They're real all the other times.
Wait.
So let's try to run through these. Bob Jorgensen, he actually just joined the group last week, and he's been in the Right 10 Club every day. So this is a comic really committed, and he actually started later in life. So he's asking, do either of you have any advice for a comic starting later in life, late 40s, married with kids?
Yes. Do not try to do edgy material. I mean, but that's just me as a preference. I've seen a lot of later in life comedians or older people starting off, women or men, surprisingly more women than men, and they try to be shocking on stage to elicit a reaction, kind of what I would call the Betty White syndrome, or the woman who played the old woman in The Wedding Singer, where they're like, oh, I bet you didn't expect for a dad to talk like this. That may serve you in the shows that you're doing, but I don't think that's going to serve you for a longevity if this is something you actually want to do. So I would just talk about what makes you laugh. Like, what kind of comedian do you want to be? Is it a one-liner? Is it a story? Like, and just really work on that and do as many shows as you can do.
Yeah, and I think
it's hard. It's hard with definitely like the bro club. Yeah. Like the bro club of like young comics who want to go out and party after every show. Like, you don't have to do that either. Do the show, be nice. Push yourself to do shows out of state. And this goes for any age of comedian. Like, just don't do the same show at the comedy. Like, don't make a mecca. Don't think that the comedy club that you really want to get stage time at is the end all be all. Because one bad thing is that the people who usually run that will never see you beyond the set you did the first time there. No matter how good you get, they'll always see you kind of as that comic or that persona or the nerves or the jitters or whatever subjects you talked about. Push yourself, get two other comics that you think are way better than you and you think it can do more time, and do the legwork to book a brewery or a winery once they're open outside, even 30 miles or 100 miles outside of where you live. Drive, make the arrangements to get paid, always get paid. Don't do a free show. Get paid something, because if you're booking two comedians that you think are better than you and the package you're selling, and you're saying we're going to do at least an hour to an hour and a half of stand-up, if you're not used to doing MC work, force yourself to MC those first few shows and then start rotating yourself into the feature spot if you can, if you get like a 15 to 20 minutes, and book live entertainment for these places that are the new modern day coffee house. Who, the breweries and the wineries, the best thing about them is they have alcohol, They usually have some sort of appetizer or food, which makes them destinations where people just don't pass through. They'll stay and they'll hang out a little bit. And for some places, they're always in the cornfields of these cities, but that could be a couple's night out, their date night. So put together a good show and treat it like it is a show at a comedy club, even though you don't need stage lights, you don't need the best sound system. Get a couple speakers and a microphone and bring your own equipment. So when the place is like, oh, we'd love to book you for $300 where each comedian gets $100 or something, or you get $150 to cover your gas if you're driving. And they're like, well, we don't have equipment. Be like, oh, it's okay. We got a microphone and speakers, and you bring the show to them. And they're like, great, because they're going to get a little bit of extra money. And it's up to them. Get a flat fee. Don't do a door fee. Your show is better than that. Granted, the audience is always paid more by just showing up. If they want to do a free show with you getting a flat fee, that's on them. But be confident in the other comedians that you're bringing and yourself, that even as MC, your 10-minute set and your hosting is going to be worth them paying the $300 to get you there and to promote that their venue has live entertainment.
Nice. Good advice. Next one is from Glenn Tickle. He asks, why did you want to go through a label instead of self-releasing your album?
Because I was Googling what labels were good for young comedians. And I came across an article where Glenn Tickle was spotlighted for self-releasing and creating a record label just for himself. And
I saw that same article.
The album did so. Yeah. And so his album did so well that when Billboard 100 called him to verify the information on the record label that the album was being released on, he had to give it a name. To which he said Circus Trapeze Records, which is a joke in his act on that album. So then began him starting a label, mostly for comedians he already knew, who he already had a lot of the paperwork for. And they were like, well, I'd like to put out an album to sell at shows. And he was like, okay, join mine. I'll do it because you know me and we're friends and we won't screw each other and blah, blah, blah. If there's something that you don't like, we'll make it right. So I reached out to him and I was like, look, I legit want to release an album and I want a label that would be enthusiastic behind releasing mine. And I contacted him before Dry Bar. I had been on Bob and Tom. I had written for IFC, but except for name dropping some people I opened for, I really didn't have any credits. And kind of like in theater, a resume is only as good as much that you can substantiate like how good you are to match the resume. It's just a piece of paper with credits. If you don't have the goods, then who cares that you were, Angel and Rent in your community theater production of Rent? It could have been a really bad production and you were the brightest turd. But so I reached out to Glenn and I said, I really like your album and I listened to it before reaching out to him. Would you be interested in producing mine? I got this form letter. It was very much, like when you read an email, you're like, oh, this is copy and paste. And like, my name has been like inserted, like, Dear Ricky, saying, if you read thank you so much for reaching out. If you read the article, I detailed how it's way more beneficial for you to release it yourself and blah, 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 and do all this and do all this. Thank you for reaching out, Glenn Tickle. And I said, cool. Yeah, I get that. I don't want to do that because I do it enough. I am my own agent and book or whatever. I also, not to pat myself on the back, like I want the prestige of a label being interested in what I'm doing to get behind. So it's not, oh, Ricky Glore, he's his own biggest promoter. He's putting out an album. Like, yeah, of course he's putting out, like anybody can put out. If you want to spend money, you can put out an album. And he responded and he was like, okay, but like, let's talk about it a little bit more. But I really think you should just put it out yourself. It's the most beneficiary, you're on the road, you can make more money off of it that way.
Interesting.
I replied, yeah. I was like, I still want it to be that way. And I said, okay, how about this? I've got a show in Upper Pennsylvania. He's in New Jersey. I was like, at a winery. I was like, how about if you're interested, you come down and feature for me? Because I already knew he was phenomenal and he's a great headliner himself. Come feature for me, bring an MC, whatever you want. The pay is this. If you like my show, produce the album under the label. If you don't, or even if you do and you still don't want to, fine. So he came, we had a great time. The show was awesome. The mic cut out during the MC, so we were micless for the rest of the night in front of like this 150 people. And we had a great time. And afterwards, he's like, let's do it. So, he said, he thinks I'm funny and he likes, what I do. But I would imagine that part of him saw the brand appeal that had to be, because from the business side of him, partially you have to look at it that way and go, okay, if I'm going to put this work and this money behind this, is this going to be lucrative to me? Which one of the next moves is he sends it off to Sirius XM with it being a completely clean album. I don't know if it was Glenn, someone said to me, and I'm going to misquote numbers, it's just for effect, the numbers I'm going to say, that they get 3,000 submissions a week of explicit comic albums. So they can only play so many of those. Because a lot of people that listen to the comedy and Sirius XM sometimes put the parameters for language. I think he or someone else said they only get 500 or like 200 submissions a week of 100% clean comedians. So your percentages of getting picked up and getting money from that because of the ad pay is so much higher. So I would think Glenn, being a businessman and thinking that it was funny in his own opinion, because comics have opinions of what they think is funny and is not, which also varies from what their taste is. Like my taste, if you would classify me as, and I'm not saying as talented or funny, as like a Jim Gaffigan or a Brian Regan, that's not necessarily the comics I'm drawn to. Like I like watching like I said, a Hannah Gatsby or a John Mulaney, who, they're not clean comics. But so I would imagine he looked at that and went, okay, even if album sales aren't great or iTunes sales, if I pitch this to Sirius XM, I might get a couple tracks from this that get some airtime, and that's where the money comes in. That's the business answer of it, which isn't like sexy or glamorous.
No, that's what people need to know, though. Yeah, that's why it was asked. Yeah. The next one, we kind of got two people asking similar things. We have Jake Rubel and Mark Mitchell here, both asking about creating a 45-minute set. And Mark asked, how much did you go through to get the 45 minutes? But Jake is asking, and how did you know your 45 minutes was done? He has issues always wanting to keep tweaking his material. So maybe how much material did you have to create? And then when did you know, okay, what I've created is enough and ready?
I'm also happy to answer all the questions that they post as long as you're happy to stay on.
This one was just kind of like in the same.
Oh, no, I get it. Yeah. I just didn't want you to think like, oh, like we're going to have to cut some of these questions.
Oh, we got them.
No, I mean, those are both really good questions. And as neurotic as even comedians that have their shit together, we're all neurotic. Like, so recording this album on February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day show, I came from Indiana doing a sold out show on Valentine's Day, a show at a winery that dinner was included, a glass of champagne was included. It's all couples, all wanting to have a good night out. I was like, this could either be the worst show to do before a night of 2 recordings for an album, also having to drive 8 hours the next day to Pittsburgh, or it could be great. It could be the easiest layup of people just wanting to have a good time, and it'll give me an energy boost. ended up being a fine show, but it did get me in my head of like running time and bits and being like, oh, well, that didn't work as well as it usually does. Should I get rid of it? Should I substitute this bit that I haven't done as much? Oh, blah, 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 blah. And this is going to happen regardless. Like, that's not saying like don't do a show a night before, because if do as many shows as you can. But then in Pittsburgh at the club, I think it held 100 people. And I already knew that the first show was sold out for the album recording. And we were recording both shows. And Glenn was featuring, which is great because he's a fantastic, like I said, fantastic comedian. And our styles are different enough that it doesn't feel like you're seeing we're both dads. He's a dad of a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old, I think, or 3-year-old. And the MC was the couple who runs the comedy club there. And it's got a great vibe. It had a jazz kind of feel. And the first show was sold out and it went great. And it was the show that is the album, because the second show was about half full. I don't know why people bought tickets. They knew it was an album recording. Couldn't have acted like they didn't want to be there. It was nuts. Like I'm not a comedian. I hate comedians who get upset with an audience on stage, who berate them for not laughing. It's like, there's no reason for that. Like my least favorite comedian is the comic who goes on stage who wants to show you how funny they are. Because for me, and a little bit of what I project on other comics is, your number one goal should be there to entertain the person who came. And you should do it the best that you can with what you've prepared. Not to be that doors couldn't open and you could chase rabbits and do improvs that are great and lead your way to like another new 5 minutes. But the 45 minutes that I did, I had done the 2 dry bar shows. I already saw a clip of a rough edit of what they were going to release as the special. So a little bit in my mind went, okay, so that's what they think the strongest 22 minutes are of the 25, 26 that I did there. Narratively, being a playwright and a screenwriter as well, I was like, I think this 45 minutes encapsulates the best story of who I am and the narrative that I'm trying to sell or put out there as a show of like a beginning, middle, and end. And at some point, you just have to start going, well, that's the show. I can still write, I can still try stuff, but you kind of have to know what the show is and do it regardless of like the times you want to second guess yourself and be like, well, that didn't work. I should write a whole new bit that fits in here. Granted, like I was still writing a couple one-liners throughout the time leading up to the show that I felt fit the narrative and worked well enough every time I did the show up to the day of the show. But like a bit that I used to do, so for 2 years, the Brew Crew Comedy Tour is one of the pages following this. That's a show I did at breweries and wineries where I would book the show and book 2 other comics, and we would rotate every show who was the MC, the feature, and the headliner. So we would each stretch our legs at each one of those positions. So that was 2017, 2018. From 2018 to 2019, I told every comedian that I had done those shows with, and I said, hey, I'm going to start being selfish. I'm going to book the shows and make myself the headliner for all the shows because my goal is an album and a special. So I started doing that. So I stretched the legs of the 45-minute set every time we performed. Something I used to do in my set, and I may even go back to for my new hour, is in the middle of my show, I would do a thing called napkin thoughts. And I would set it up by saying, we all have tiny computers. That's my baby, by the way. That's why the album's called Spitting Image. I'm told she looks like me. I would say we all have tiny computers in our pockets. I still like to write my thoughts down on napkins. So here are some of my napkin thoughts. And I would legit pull out napkins where I had written one-liners or non sequiturs on. And that would be about a 6-minute chunk in my act where I would test out new ideas, where because of the way I presented the idea of the bit of them being napkin thoughts, just thoughts, is I could do anything because they didn't have to connect to one another. And then if I came up with multiples that fit the same narrative or the same joke, then I would turn that into a bit and I would move it out of napkin thoughts and I would put it into my act.
It's great. Lowers the bar and lowers the pressure on the joke. You're like, it's just a napkin thought if it works or not. So it gives you a little more freedom to just try. Which
sees how wordy you have to be too. Like if I can tell this real short and quick as a one-liner, and then there's 3 one-liners about, say, this isn't pertaining to mine, but it's 3 one-liners about a vacation or a family in a car. Because now it's a vacation bit, and this is a 3-minute chunk that should go together, because I think there's a comedian that I've worked with a few times who's been in the business a long time, whose success level has only risen so high. He's known in our area for being a comic who's not aware of the audience, and he's not aware of cobbling ideas together in his own act. Like, he'll talk about something early in his act and then go 10 minutes later and then talk about something similar without acknowledging that he knows it's an idea he's already talked about. And so, like, I've seen comedians like this, besides this specific comedian, where it's like, if you just pulled them together, or you narratively, if there was a reason why you separated them to make them bookends to a stronger idea, you would look like a mathematician of a performer. Because how many comedians can you think of when they do a callback and they narratively has strung together something that you as an audience didn't even realize that it was the same theme or tone?
Yeah, that's important. I think, like, people are wondering, like, when to stop tweaking and stuff. I mean, it's really, in my opinion, like, having some sort of deadline, like you're saying, well, I have this recording coming up, I better start doing more headlining sets so I can get ready. Otherwise, like, I know Jake is a very new comic, and it's like, keep tweaking, keep writing, keep growing. I mean, in my special, I've been doing it 10 years now, and like I did some jokes that started out as a one-liner in year 3, and then at year 6, it grew into like a 3-minute bit that I then did in my comedy special, 4 years later. So it's like they evolve and grow.
Never get rid of rid of bits. Like, recycle them. Recycle even a line from them. Like, but I think part of that comes from my like screenwriting and playwriting, where maybe I'll start writing something and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, partially because I'm ADHD.
No.
But I will go back to what? ADD works for me. I'll look at you and then I'll look at. But I will. It's called mining. So you can mine your material, where even if you're like, well, I don't do that joke anymore because I've evolved as a comedian. Well, what are you currently doing that needs a punch up of a big laugh or a big joke or a quick joke, like just a one line? And you go back and you're like, oh, well, I'm talking about dating, and I've got this killer one line joke that didn't fit with anything else, but I can throw in right here because it works with what I'm talking about when I used to date, but maybe I'm even a different person. Like, I don't even think it made it on my album. I cut it because I also questioned if I had heard it before. And this, I'll be candid, I got called out on my Dry Bar special for doing a joke that people said was a meme. And it could very well have been that I didn't remember being a meme, and that I thought, I mean, not necessarily like the Dane Cook, like parallel thinking or whatever. I thought it was, in retrospect now, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I thought that was like a coffee, like a water cooler kind of thing of like, oh yeah, that's something people talk about. But like a joke I made was when talking about online dating with my wife, that I had to ask her out on a date because her eyes were beautiful. Her eyes spoke to me. Her eyes said to me that I would regret if I didn't ask her on a date. And, but I swear I'm not like a serial killer. because the only thing that serial killer and hopeless romantics have in common is they're always talking about the one that got away. And I thought that was a joke that I maybe had heard before or some variation of. And no matter like how many times I had been doing it, I was like, I don't feel comfortable that this isn't a completely original thought. So I'm going to get rid of it. I'm just going to stop doing it because I have enough other things that go with this bit or whatever that I don't feel guilty or weird about saying it. But that's also to say, like, don't type every joke you come up with into Google. Just make it so personal or a spin of yours with your verbiage that even everything's been talked about. You can't talk about something that's not been talked about. And there's no reason for you to be an abstract version of who you are if that's not who you are somewhat as a person or as a defense mechanism. So don't overthink yourself.
And when we're thinking of writing, like you're saying, just keep writing and new ideas, we have a question all the way from Greece here, and I cannot pronounce his name.
My wife is Greek.
Yeah, we have a lot of people from Greece in the group.
My wife is Delianitis.
Yeah, we have a lot of comics from Greece that are in the group. And
Interesting.
We're all over the world, baby. We're in every continent but Antarctica so far.
Everybody's got hot breath.
Get there. So he asks, when writing one-liners, how can someone find new premises all the time? Puns excluded.
Puns excluded. He's got a real Achilles heel for puns, and people are like, no, no more pun. Puns excluded. I wrote a thing about Hot Pockets the other day, and someone on Twitter, again, because I use Twitter as a notebook kind of. If I'm not making notes in my phone, at the bathroom, if you're riding public transportation, like even when I was in Chicago and not doing stand-up all the time, I would sit there and I'd look around and I'd be like blinding. I'd look at shoes, like someone wearing shoes, like that's an interesting pair of shoes. Like, what's a joke about shoes? Like, oh, walk a mile in someone's shoes, like unless they're clown shoes. And then you probably can't walk a mile because that's going to hurt your feet. There's a one-liner. Like, it's maybe not funny, but it's doing word association and it's doing I think one-liners are great for observational humor because you only have one line. And for me, they either have to be relatable and then an abstract turn, or it's relatable the whole way through. One-liners are also good for titters, which titters is a funny word for just chuckles. To be a nice transition maybe between bigger ideas. You can do a couple of them or one of them. I wouldn't worry about it being a new thought. Like one thing that I think, one bit that came from my album that is about horror movies is what started as a one-liner was that the killers in horror movies never have the body shape of someone like me because you'd always know who the killer was. And so like that turned into like a 5-minute bit of like me, if I was wearing like the Ghostface outfit from Scream, and you're like, which one of these teenagers is the killer? Well, it's the fat kid, Ricky. Like, clearly, he has 80 pounds on all of us. And while he was chasing us through the woods, he stopped to lean on a tree and breathe really heavy. So, like, that kind of started as a one-liner joke. There is a thing with being too harsh of a self-editor, which kind of goes with what I was saying of, like, don't Google all of your material just to make sure that, like, there's a difference between Carlos Mencia doing a bit from Bill Cosby special that was on DVD and sold in the $5 bins at Walmart. There's a difference between doing what he has done or even Dane Cook, some of the stuff that sounds almost word for word, and then going and doing things that are ubiquitous ideas that happen to all of us, which makes some of the ripest comedy. Because there are your interpretations and spin on things.
Yes.
in your
I
POV.
think that's where a
And
lot of
that's
it
not the
comes
same.
from is what is your point of view on things? What is your perspective? And that's where your sense of humor and that's where your voice is really going to start to shine through is when you start looking at what is your personal opinion, point of view, experience. That's when you're going to start finding new premises all the time because you're starting to look for material through the filter of yourself and not, oh, what can I make funny or not? It's like, well, what is funny about me or my
Right.
quirks or my perspective that you can then turn into funny material?
Yeah, and it's with the new hour that I'm writing is using a jumping off point is using my old set list and topics and going, okay, has anything happened that is similar to this
Oh, I love
that
that.
I have new takes on or views? So like one of them is horror movies. I love horror movies. If I could show you my basement right now, I have an original Nightmare on Elm Street poster. I have a wall of sequel posters. So it's like Scream 2, Psycho 2, Halloween 2. I love horror movies. So in my on my album Spitting Image, there's a bit about how horror movie killers don't look like me because you'd know who they were. There'd be no mystery. That bit also has that in horror movies, if they introduce a dog, that dog's going to get killed, and my wife hates it. She can watch a million teenagers get slaughtered, even kids, but a dog or an animal, that's when she has a gripe. Um, so I was like, okay, horror movies is part of my old set list and outline. What other takes on horror movies do I find funny? Well, I used to do a podcast where all we would do is watch horror movies. So I've seen enough, good and bad. And I've also had the gripe that thank God cell phones didn't exist in old horror movies. So like Janet Leigh's character in Psycho would have never stayed at the Bates Motel if she could have pulled up Yelp and then been like, oh, the guy who owns this has some real serious mommy issues. I'll go to that bed and breakfast down the road. Or like, or if they had cell phones at Nightmare on Elm Street where they could like, it could wake you up with an alarm at a certain time or whatever, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, so I start looking at it with what I've already done as a nice access point to hopefully open a door for something that I'm already passionate about, because the confidence that you can put on stage with what you're presenting, even if it's the first time you've ever said it, an audience, even if they aren't wanting you, most of the time an audience you should have in your head wants you to succeed. They want to have fun. They want to have a good time. Every now and then there's the asshole who's the funniest person from their office, which they will self-proclaim after the show. And his name's usually like something like Jerry or Dale. And there's a very few amount of those. And most of the time the audience will rally against that person and shut them down for you if they're a heckler. But everyone has come there to give their time to have a good time. So if you are confident with what you're talking about and passionate, then they already accept what you're saying. And even if they don't laugh, first shows on Friday are a great example of a 2-show night and a 7:00 show where they just got off work, rushed to get home, have a shower, and maybe grabbed a bite to eat before coming to the show. They're tired. They could love the show and you could not get a laugh or a little
True.
titters. And that doesn't mean that they didn't love your show. So there's no reason to berate the audience and be like, well, last night everyone loved that joke. Why aren't you laughing? Just go on with your show. Like, you know what you're doing. You're there to entertain. Like, your ego shouldn't be so hurt if they're not laughing. Because early on in my career, I would do shows and the audience wouldn't laugh. And I'd be like, wow, they hated me. Something I said really set them off. And the people that I was looking at who I could see their faces in the audience, they would be like, oh my God, you're so funny. You're so good. And part of me wants to say a good way to show that you're having a good time is to laugh, but you don't know what their day was.
Exactly. So, oh yeah, Mike's saying this is the most useful info I've heard from one live show. Great job, both you guys. New and permanent fan. Awesome.
Yay! Buy the
Buy
album.
the
Buy
album.
the album.
It's linked in the comments. If Glenn, if you want to repost it as
And
well. So what?
yeah, and leave a review. If you buy it on if you buy the physical copy on circustrapeze.com/Ricky Glore or Circus Trapeze, you can go there. If you get that, you get a digital download too. So don't feel like you're buying an archaic piece of media. You can still get it on your phone or whatever device you listen to. You just get a cool physical piece, which I still like having, like a vinyl or something or a CD to get that artwork and the liner notes. But if you buy it on even iTunes or Amazon, please leave a review. And if you can, just because it helps me out, screenshot your review and tag me on social media, like on Twitter at Ricky Glore, and just say, hey, this is my review. I hated this guy. Tag me. I do not care. There's no such thing as bad press either.
Oh, and he said, my name is spellable form of Christos Athanasoulis.
Oh man, I really want to hop on Facebook and see if I can pronounce
it's
this. If I can get any Greek credit points.
And
I see Jake Rubel.
Yeah, Jake Rubel.
Which I said my
name. Okay, you can see it.
Oh, Christos Athanasoulis.
Cool. All right.
Athanasoulis.
All right. Thank you, Christos. Let's see. We got a couple more here. This one comes from John Cromarty.
Yep.
You mentioned watching Comedian regularly. How much time do you spend watching other comics? Do you watch other people's specials?
Yeah, I am in a weird spot sometimes when I'm writing and I want to be as distant from other comedians as possible to feel the gestations of new ideas and feel like that I'm not influenced by anything. Again, I watch the comics that I dig. Usually I don't think come from my voice. I grew up watching a lot of old television. As I mentioned, Monkeys. I loved watching Hope and Crosby movies, the road pictures, Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. Not as much the Martin and Lewis, but I liked Dean Martin. They were meaner. I like Three Stooges because they weren't as mean in the slapstick. Growing up, people would always be like, oh man, I used to do a Chris Farley impression, especially when I was clean shaven. And I stopped doing it because I hated after shows. People would be like, oh man, you're the reincarnation of Chris Farley. I don't know why that bugged me. People had a good time and they remembered me. Great, whatever. But the comeback that I wanted to say when I was a younger comic was, well, I like David Spade more. I like Whit more. And I love Farley. I love them together. They are the best they ever were together. My favorite comic from SNL was Phil Hartman.
Yeah.
That cast, Phil Hartman, Dana Carvey, Kevin Nealon, John Lovitz, Nora Dunn, Jan Hooks, Victoria Jackson, Mike Myers. So old school kind of comedy and what Phil Hartman did, which then gave me a great appreciation for everyone who was considered the glue on SNL. That's your Dan Aykroyd, your Phil Hartman, your Bill Hader, Will Ferrell to a degree, but he actually expands a little farther than that. But so I'll watch stuff that maybe isn't necessarily stand up, but is kind of the humor that I'm feeling. So if I'm writing something that is joke intensive, I might watch a stand up like a John Mulaney or Trevor Noah. And I'm trying to think of what special. Oh, I really enjoyed Seth Meyers' special, Lobby Baby. I've gotten such more of appreciation for him since he started doing late night with Seth Meyers than I ever did when he was on SNL, except for the last couple of years that he did Weekend Update. He is a comic. I really like his mind and his approach. If anyone's not listening to it, not that he needs plugs, but his podcast, which is an abbreviated version of his late night show, even the one from home, he usually does one segment, which is a closer look, which is just on one topic. and then he does a guest. It's a 20-minute listen. It's phenomenal, especially to give you like an unabreasted version of the political climate, which, I mean, sure, it's biased because he is a Democrat, but he's also a humanitarian, which is, that's how I feel, that like, yeah, his leanings may be Democrat, but he's also pointing out the atrocities that are happening from every angle. So, yeah, that's what I'll listen to or watch when I want to get inspiration. How Did This Get Made with Jason Mantzoukas? I couldn't be any more different than Jason Mantzoukas. There's another Greek. If you're Greek, it's fantastic. But yeah, there are also times where I feel like I have to remove myself from anything comedic to feel like that I'm getting an earnest interpretation of where I want to go with my writing.
Cool. All right. Let's take a few more minutes here. I gotta get out of here at 8:30. My in-laws are here. So I need to go spend a little family time.
Joe, what are you doing talking to yourself in that room? Come out here, play Pachisi.
Yeah, they hear me yell because I do the Right 10 Club every morning. They've been hearing me yelling every morning at 10 a.m. in here. They're like, "Is that his job, honey? This is who you married?"
Does he make money? Oh, that's the best question to be asked when you're doing comedy starting off. So how much does that pay? Nothing.
Right. Yep.
Not a lick. How far are you driving?
Oh yeah. Let's try to give them like quick sound bites on these last few years. 'Cause I want to get to peeps because I appreciate all y'all hanging out and all the comments and all the sharing, but all of y'all saying how helpful this is and everything. We really do appreciate that interaction.
And also, if you want to ask me if we don't get to something or you want something to be expounded on even more, feel free to send me a message via Twitter because I think my mailbox is open, or write me a tweet and I will answer it.
Oh, you know what the crazy timing of that is? Justin Williams says, "Thanks for replying to my tweet today." And he has a question. Oh. That's so cool. That's so cool. So he said, "Yeah, thanks for replying to my tweet today. Have you ever done a show?" And actually, real quick, I feel like someone else asked
a similar question.
Similar thing. I want to make sure. Oh, yeah. Okay. And Earl Anderson, kind of on the same line here. So Justin asked, have you ever done a show where a set killed one night but bombs the next? And then it kind of ties into Earl's where it's like, he asks, let's see, have you ever had material that killed for a while and then it's like, meh, how do you handle it? So I guess the overall topic is like, yeah, what do you do with material that maybe kills one night and then the next it doesn't? Do you have an approach that you found helpful?
I don't think you should berate an audience, but there are some times where the audience sucks, and that's okay. It's okay to then go, that was a one-off, for whatever the permutations are with sound, with light, with what time the show was, with how the people who organized or the venue put the show together, could be out of your control. Also, you could have been off that night. You could have been thinking about a lot of things that you didn't really recognize in your presentation of the show or the persona that you're putting off. That doesn't mean that you're a failure or what you did was going to be bad like that every night leading on. If you did something one night and it didn't do well the next night, kind of the same answer. There's a lot of variables that I think you have to be cognizant of going, I could easily beat myself up and say it's me. I could easily, on the other end of that prism, go, the audience was just awful. I think it's a little bit of give and take. Like, look at both of those, listen to your audio that you recorded, or if you're at the stage where I said audio starting off, video is once you need to start doing precision work on your delivery of your physicality, of what things could aid the things that you're saying by the body language that you're giving off, or by movement, by pauses, by the way you're showing them, by facial expression. those I think are the seasonings to whatever your set is. First get the audio, then you can do video. I don't think you need to video record everything. It's just a waste of time. You're not going to watch it. Listen to it while you're going to your next show or you're driving the next day or something. But yeah, if something doesn't work that did work, even if it's the first time you did it, I don't think you should get rid of anything until you've done it 10 times. And that means also trying it in different positions. If you're like, say if it's your child, which jokes are considered babies a lot of times, you want to give it the best chance that it can at succeeding. So don't put it at the beginning of your show, even though you're real excited because you just wrote it and you're like, this is killer. Put it in the middle every time, no matter like how good you think it is. Do the tried and true opening. Even if you think this thing's going to be the new best opening ever, don't do it first. Don't do it last. Put it smack dab. Even if it's 5 minutes, do an opening, couple killer one-liners, do this new thing, do your closer. If it's longer set, always just put it in the middle. And if it doesn't work one night, keep doing it. Part of the question you asked was, you've been doing it for a while and it doesn't work. Reevaluate how much you're sucking at doing it. So listen to that audio or watching that camera and going, oh, you're not passionate or confident about it. You look like you're just getting through this bit. Mm-hmm. Is that why it's not working? So that means you should do it better, or you should just get rid of it if you're going to deep six your own set every night, because you're not going to give this bit the energy and that it needs. If you're over it, yeah, get over it, like move it along.
All right. So I
hope that was soundbitey enough.
Yeah, there's some good questions coming in. And honestly, like I see you, Mahir and Robin and Michelle, and I see your questions here. But they're going to be in the comments. So even if like you on Facebook, instead of them tweeting you, I guess you could just respond here. And we could figure out a way, because I'll release this as a podcast on YouTube as well. But yeah.
Or it's Facebook. Follow me on my comedian's Facebook page, and if you want to repost them or whatever, I'll answer them there too if that's easier for people.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So reach out to Ricky after you get his album, because support a fellow comedian here. It's been posted in the comments.
That's the prerequisite.
Yeah, and Glenn, the man behind Circus Trapeze, is good people. I mean, when I was researching, I didn't know if I wanted to do a special or a comedy album, and I was researching both. And Glenn's article about independently producing a comedy album is your one-stop shop for knowing everything about releasing a comedy album. It's the most thorough resource I was able to find in hours of Googling and research. So Glenn is definitely an asset to the comedy community we're going to have on here. So it's all for comics by comics here, and that's why we had Ricky on the show today. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want the Hot Breathiverse to know here, Ricky? Did Ricky freeze? Wait.
Yeah.
Wait, were we just wrapping up and then you froze? Oh my gosh. What kind of timing is that?
All my shows starting in March got canceled. Am I frozen? Can you hear me? Am I still here?
Oh, you are now. Oh, what timing? Even the internet's like, come on, guys, land this plane here.
Been doing this for too long.
But reach out to Ricky with your questions, please. I mean, this guy is a comedy resource, and he is now like officially in the Hot Breathiverse. So this is not the last time we're gonna connect. But reach out to him with more questions. But please go ahead and finish what you were saying.
No, I was just going to say, since all my shows started getting canceled in March, I only have a couple dates that are still tentative here and there between now and the end of 2020, which would have been a good opportunity to sell them albums. So please buy it. Mm-hmm. Gifted to someone who wants 100% clean comedy. And like, buy the physical copy and you send it to someone, you put in an address of a friend or a family member. So that's a good reason to buy it. The thing that I've been doing to stay creative, I did one Zoom show, which was great. Glenn put it on and I did it. And I had a good time doing it. I worked some new material, but there isn't an audience there. And I love entertaining. Like, I love making an audience happy. So I started doing a weekly YouTube series called Weekend Pup Date with Norm McDonfeld. So it's a puppet that does a kind of an homage to Weekend Update. It's evolved into a Sesame Street meets Daily Show, but it's every week on the YouTube channel Weekend Pup Date. And check it out. It's hosted by this guy.
Hey.
Hey, I'm Norm McDonfeld, and I'm just trying to give you the straight dope, baby. So yeah, just come over to Weekend Pup Date on YouTube, and I'll just give you all the news that's happening. We got music videos, we got editorial pieces, we got musical guests. Oh, and look at our back catalog, and we got a lot of ex-SNL cast members who've come on and done some stuff. So how you doing, Joe? Did you get asked to come on the new
Yeah.
the new Arrested Development series?
Yeah, sounds good. Nice
What's
nose.
that? I think I'm losing you.
Nice nose.
What's that?
Your nose is taking up the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
screen.
What? No, I don't know how this Zoom
It
works.
keeps cutting out. You broke the internet. You're so ugly. You broke the internet.
Oh, that's so mean.
What? Oh, you
So
roast
mean.
me.
Usually I
and
get
then-
Seth Rogen. I didn't say Michael Cera was ugly.
Well, I was saying
I think
Norm
you
is
just got
ugly.
canceled on Twitter.
I didn't say that.
Norm is ugly.
It was the sock puppet that said it. I didn't say that. It's Triumph the Insult Sock. That's what it is. Doing sock puppets.
Yeah, so all I have left is subscribe to Weekend Pup Date. We've got a lot of great comedians throughout the United States who are in the same predicament as me, who are submitting pieces, who are writing jokes. Luke Knoll, who's a cast member at SNL, submitted a couple songs. Gary Kroger, if you're an SNL aficionado, he was on from 82 to 85 with Julie Louis-Dreyfus.
Wow.
He submitted a whole impression character piece, and it was amazing. So yeah, please subscribe to that. It's a weekly show,
Yeah.
7 o'clock on Saturdays it drops. Also follow me at Ricky Glore on Twitter and follow me on Facebook.
Awesome. And we will link
That's all I got.
to the album in the show notes and the video description. It's also in the comments here. If you have any other questions that popped up either during this or after, reach out to Ricky. You know, you could tell his heart's in the right place and enjoying not only comedy but also helping other comedians, which is what we're all about here at Hot Breath. So, Ricky, I'm so glad this happened, and thanks for sharing your valuable time and information with us.
Thank you for having me and let me bring out my puppet.
Of course, my puppet as well. I just had a character debut that everyone's roasting. So that's good to know. All right. So go forth, Hot Breath the Verse. Reach out to Ricky
Fancy sock, though.
with any questions and join our Facebook group if you're listening or watching this. Go join that Facebook group. You're going to learn a lot of comedy. It's all a comedy resource that I wish existed when I started comedy 10 years ago. So we're doing positive things here, and Ricky, you're now a part of it. So welcome to the Hot Breath Verse, my friend. Yeah. All right. Well, everyone have a good night. We will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the Right 10 Club, everyone. Goodbye. Hey, Hot Brethren and Sistren. If you love comedy as much as we do here at Hot Breath, click the subscribe button to join the Hot Breathiverse and then watch more videos to get even more comedy tips. Hot Breath.